Deep in the Appalachians, where shadows cling like unconfessed sins, a cabin stands unmarked, erased from every map, every record, as if divine judgment willed it invisible. But why? What horror lingers there, whispering of guilt and eternal retribution, waiting for the lost to stumble upon its door? In the shadowed folds of the Appalachian Mountains, where the earth itself seems to breathe with the weight of forgotten sins, a story unfolds that challenges the very fabric of what we believe to be real. This is not merely a tale of a hidden cabin, but a parable of human hubris, divine omission, and the chilling voids left in the wake of secrets too grave to chart. Maps, those sacred scrolls of civilization, promise order amid chaos. They etch the boundaries of our world, declaring what exists and what does not. Yet, imagine a place so profane, so laced with the echoes of moral transgression, that it was stricken from every official ledger, as if the hand of Providence itself had drawn a veil over it. This is the enigma of August Vance's cabin, a dwelling that defies the gaze of man and God alike, a symbol of isolation not just geographical, but spiritual, a forsaken outpost where redemption hangs by a thread, and the wilderness judges the soul. The year 1887 marked an era of conquest, not with swords or rifles, but with the precise instruments of science. The United States Geological Survey, forged in the fires of the 1879 Survey Act, was America's bold decree to tame the untamed. Their mandate, to dissect the nation's vast body, vein by vein, ridge by ridge, exposing its secrets to the light of progress. It was an act of biblical ambition, akin to Adam naming the beasts in Eden, imposing dominion over the wild, rendering the formless into form. Surveyors ventured into realms where the frontier blurred into myth, where rivers carved canyons like the finger of God tracing judgment, and mountains rose like altars to ancient, indifferent deities. This was no mere cartography. It was a philosophical crusade, a battle against the unknown, where every contour line drawn was a victory over entropy, a step toward manifesting destiny on paper. One such crusade plunged into the mist-veiled heart of western North Carolina, a labyrinth of peaks that pierced the heavens like thorns in a crown of suffering. The Appalachians here were no passive backdrop, they pulsed with life, a living testament to creation's raw fury. Towering oaks, their bark etched with the scars of centuries, stood sentinel over valleys plunged into eternal twilight, where sunlight filtered through canopies like grace sparingly bestowed. The air hung heavy, saturated with the earthy musk of decaying leaves, the resinous bite of pine sap that stung the nostrils, and the subtle undercurrent of ozone from storms eternally brewing on the horizon. Fog rolled in like the breath of ghosts, wrapping the landscape in a shroud that muffled sounds and distorted sights, turning every hike into a pilgrimage through uncertainty. Rivers whispered over smooth stones, their waters cold as penance, carrying the silt of eroded mountains, reminders that even stone yields to time's inexorable judgment. The wind sighed through hollows, carrying faint echoes of wildlife, the sharp cry of a red-tailed hawk circling above, a predator's gaze mirroring divine oversight, the rustle of deer vanishing into underbrush, elusive as fleeting virtue. This terrain evoked a spiritual unease, as if the land itself bore witness to humanity's fall. Biblical echoes abounded. These mountains, with their jagged spines, recalled the wilderness where Christ faced temptation, or the crags where Moses glimpsed the promised land but could not enter. Here, isolation bred introspection, forcing souls to confront their inner voids. The surveyors, intruders in this sacred wild, carried the hubris of Babel, seeking to measure what perhaps should remain immeasurable. Their work was a modern echo of the tower, stacking knowledge skyward, defying the chaos below. At the helm of this expedition stood Thomas Holt, a man forged in the crucible of precision. His face, weathered like ancient parchment, bore the creases of endless horizons scanned under unrelenting suns, deep furrows around eyes of steel-blue intensity, eyes that dissected the world into angles and elevations. Holt embodied the surveyor's creed, faith in the infallible truth of mathematics, or chaos surrendered to the grid. He moved with deliberate grace, his boots crunching over gravel like the ticking of a cosmic clock. His instruments, the gleaming brass theodolite, its lenses capturing light like captured revelations, the alidade, sliding smoothly over the plane table like a scribe's quill, were relics of his devotion. Each adjustment, each notation in his leather-bound journal, was a ritual, a prayer to order. Holt saw the wilderness not as a foe, but as a riddle from the Almighty, demanding solution. Yet beneath his stoic facade lurked a flicker of doubt, a whisper that some mysteries were divinely ordained to remain shrouded, lest they unravel the seeker. Beside him trudged Percy Dale, a fledgling scholar fresh from ivy-clad halls, his youth a spark in the dim forest. Percy's cheeks still held the flush of idealism, his frame wiry and restless, hands forever fidgeting with compass or chain. He viewed the mountains through a poet's prism, peaks as cathedrals, valleys as confessionals where nature whispered psalms. His chatter filled the silence as observations on the play of light through leaves, like stained glass in a forgotten church, questions about the lives etched into this land, souls as gnarled as the roots underfoot. Yet his enthusiasm masked a deeper anxiety, a tremor in his voice when shadows lengthened, as if he sensed the spiritual undercurrents Holt dismissed as fancy. Percy sought adventure, but the wilderness stirred in him a biblical awe, the fear of the Lord that is the beginning of wisdom, mingled with the thrill of discovery. Their guide, Eli Greer, was the mountains incarnate. Born of Yancey County's rugged lineage, his blood ran thick with the lore of generations who wrested life from stone. His face was a testament, skin tanned to leather, lines radiating from eyes dark as coal seams, eyes that pierced the veil between seen and unseen. Eli moved like mist, silent, fluid, his moccasins whispering over trails invisible to outsiders. He knew the land's rhythms, the subtle shift of wind heralding rain, the faint spoor of bear or bobcat, the hidden springs bubbling like manna from rock. His speech was sparse, each word a nugget mined from depths of experience, laced with an archaic cadence that evoked Old Testament prophets. Eli carried the weight of unspoken histories, tales of feuds like Cain and Abel, of hardships mirroring Job's trials. He bridged worlds, the surveyor's rational realm and the mountain's mystical domain, where spirits lingered in hollows, and justice was meted by nature's hand. For weeks, their toil was a symphony of endurance. Dawn broke with the chorus of birdsong, piercing the chill air like calls to prayer. They ascended slopes slick with dew, muscles burning as they hauled gear, chains clinking like shackles of progress. Measurements unfolded in ritual, Holt aligning the theodolite, its crosshairs framing infinity, Percy chaining distances, each link a step toward mastery, Eli scouting ahead, his form dissolving into foliage. The sun climbed, baking their necks, while gnats swarmed in biblical plagues, testing their resolve. Lunch was meager hardtack and jerky, chewed in silence amid buzzing insects, the taste metallic with sweat. Afternoons blurred into calculations, Holt's pencil scratching paper like inscriptions on stone tablets. As dusk fell, they camped under canopies of stars, the Milky Way a river of light evoking the heavenly host. Nights hummed with life, owls hooting warnings, crickets chirping litanies, the occasional howl of a wolf stirring primal fears. Sleep came fitful, dreams haunted by the land's vastness, a reminder of human frailty. They charted the nascent Pisgah forest, a realm so remote it felt like Eden before the fall, untouched, yet pregnant with peril. Isolation amplified every sense, the crunch of leaves underfoot like breaking bones, the drip of condensation from branches, cold as tears of remorse. History clung here, whispers of Cherokee ghosts displaced by manifest greed, echoes of Civil War deserters hiding in caves like Jonah in the whale. Holt felt it occasionally, a prickle on his skin, as if the land judged their intrusion, weighing their souls on invisible scales. It was on a sweltering afternoon, the air thick as molasses, pregnant with thunder, that anomaly struck. Humidity pressed like a confessor's hand, sense intensifying, loam rich as fertile sin, pine sharp as accusation. They navigated a rhododendron thicket, blooms vivid pink against glossy leaves, branches snagging clothes like grasping fingers. Eli halted abruptly, his body tensing like a prophet sensing omen. The group froze, breaths held in the oppressive hush, a silence not serene, but expectant, like the pause before divine wrath. A tendril of smoke spiraled upward, ethereal against storm-bruised clouds, defying the wilderness's solitude. Smoke, Eli intoned, his voice gravelly, laced with foreboding. No fire should burn here. This hollow's forsaken, too deep for hunters, too cursed for settlers. His words hung, evoking biblical fire, the burning bush, or Sodom's pyres. Holt unfurled his map, fingers tracing inked lines, streams like veins, ridges like spines. Nothing. A void stared back, mocking his life's work. This was heresy against science, an existence unrecorded, a soul unregistered in the book of life. Curiosity ignited, but unease flickered. What if this blank was intentional, a divine redaction? Forward, Holt commanded, voice steady yet edged with thrill. Percy paled, eyes wide as saucers, glancing at shadows that seemed to deepen, alive with unseen watchers. Eli's jaw set, a silent prayer perhaps. Crossing his lips. They pressed on, undergrowth clawing, air growing denser, scented with wood smoke now acrid, inviting, like incense in a forbidden temple. Sounds amplified, boots squelching mud, branches snapping like judgments. A wood thrush's melody pierced, melancholic as a dirge. Then, revelation, through a parted veil of hemlocks, needles dripping moisture like holy water, stood the cabin. Not a decrepit husk, but vital, logs hewn with care, chinked against elements. Smoke curled languidly from a chimney of fieldstone, gray against verdant backdrop. A garden thrived, cornstalks tall as guardians, beans twining like serpents in Eden. Chickens pecked earth, their clucks domestic heresy in wild silence. A goat bleated, tethered, eyes reflecting primal knowing. The clearing was an oasis of order amid chaos, a defiant Eden carved from wilderness, yet isolated as Gethsemane. As they neared, gravel crunching underfoot like bones in a grave, the door creaked open. Out stepped August Vance, a specter of age, stooped yet sturdy, frame like weathered oak. Hair and beard cascaded white, wild as prophet's mane, catching fading light like halo or curse. Clad in faded homespun, patches telling tales of mended sins, his eyes pale blue, abyssal, held eternity's gaze, piercing souls like the eyes of judgment. He regarded them not with shock, but serene inevitability, as if fate had scripted their arrival. No warmth, no fear, just a vigilance calm, a guardian at forbidden gates. Greetings, Holt hailed, voice echoing unnaturally, hand raised like a supplicant's. We're geological survey. Mapping these lands. He motioned to gear, symbols of authority now feeling impotent. Vance nodded, eyes lingering on instruments, flicker of recognition, or disdain. Surveyors, he rasped, voice like wind through crypts, dry and ancient. Rare sight this deep. Mountains swallow the curious. His grip, when offered, was iron calluses mapping labors untold. Inside, the cabin enveloped them, walls of logs, scarred yet solid, exhaling wood smoke's warmth mingled with herbs, sage for purification, time for time's passage. A bed, quilted patchwork like fragmented memories, table rough-hewn, shelves bowed under tomes, leather spines whispering of alchemy, theology, lost arts. Volumes on sin's anatomy, redemption's paths, evoking forbidden knowledge like the tree of life. Vance offered sustenance, spring water, crystalline and cold as absolution, stew simmering, rabbit tender, cornbread golden, flavors grounding, yet laced with isolation's tang. As they ate, fire crackled, shadows dancing like tempted spirits on walls. Holt probed, your home's absent from records. How long here? Why this seclusion? Vance's laugh rumbled low, like earth's groan. Time's a river, Mr. Holt. I've dwelt since before your lines scarred paper. Mountains heed no maps, only roots, deep as souls. Evasive, his words circled truth like vultures over carrion, hinting at burdens biblical, exile like Cain, wandering marked. Percy chattered of books, world beyond trains thundering like apocalyptic steeds, cities pulsing like Sodom's vice. Vance listened, gaze unblinking, dissecting intense like a confessor. Twilight descended, sky bleeding crimson and indigo, shadows elongating like accusations. Vance urged stay, night devours trails. Fire's sanctuary. Holt acquiesced, unease coiling, this cabin a threshold to unknown, Vance its enigmatic keeper. Bedrolls unfurled by hearth, flames hypnotizing, walls seeming to pulse. Vance piped smoke, silhouette spectral. Holt pondered, this anomaly a sign? A cabin omitted not by error, but decree, divine or diabolical, a haunt where sins festered, unabsolved. As embers glowed, the night deepened, wind moaning like lamentations. Sleep evaded, minds churning with questions, what guilt anchored Vance here? What retribution loomed? The cabin, a cipher of spiritual desolation, whispered promises of revelation and ruin. Yet deeper layers beckoned. Vance's eyes, in firelight, betrayed flickers, sorrow? Defiance? Biblical parallels mounted, like Enoch, walked with God yet vanished, or Elijah, hidden in wilderness. The garden outside, thriving against odds, symbolized perseverance amid curse, thorns and thistles post-fall. The smoke, ascending like prayers, perhaps unanswered, curling toward indifferent heavens. Percy's dreams stirred restless visions of maps bleeding ink, cabins multiplying like plagues. Eli, ever vigilant, murmured mountain lore, hollows where souls lingered, unburied, seeking justice. Holt, rational bastion, felt faith fracture, science's light dimming against this void. Morning would bring pursuit, but night held dominion, amplifying dread. The cabin's silence screamed, some places, like sins, were meant hidden, lest exposure invite apocalypse. Vance's presence loomed, a riddle incarnate. Whispers of his past surfaced in mind's eye, perhaps a fugitive from justice, marked like Cain, or seeker of solitude, like hermits fleeing world's corruption. Books hinted esoterica, treatises on alchemy, transmuting base to gold like soul's redemption, volumes on demonology, warding evil. Did he guard a threshold? A portal where natural met supernatural? The fire popped, sparks ascending like souls to judgment. Outside, nocturnal symphony, coyotes yipping like demons, branches scraping like accusing fingers. The air cooled, frost nipping like conscience's bite. In this vigil, empathy bloomed for Vance, exiled perhaps by tragedy, bearing cross alone, for surveyors, intruders tempting fate. Curiosity morphed to dread, what if mapping this profane divine order? As hours stretched, spiritual chill deepened, cabin a microcosm of existence. Fragile sheltered against chaos, where faith tested, sins confronted. Vance's gaze, even in shadow, pierced, mirrored to intruders' souls, reflecting hidden guilts. Dawn's first light would pierce, but night reigned, pregnant with possibility. The story, just unfolding, promised depth's biblical guilt's chains, justice's sword, redemption's elusive grace. The night in Vance's cabin wrapped around them like a shroud woven from unspoken confessions. No gentle lullaby of crickets or wind through pines could pierce that heaviness, instead, the silence pressed inward, thick and accusatory, carrying the faint metallic taste of old blood on the tongue, the phantom scent of fear long dried into the logs. Thomas Holt lay on his bedroll, eyes fixed on the rafters where shadows danced like tormented spirits in the dying firelight. Sleep eluded him, a fugitive chased by relentless questions, why this cabin, alone among thousands, had been stricken from existence. Why did the very air feel charged with judgment, as if the mountains themselves held their breath, awaiting reckoning? Each creak of the settling timbers echoed like a verdict. Holt's mind replayed the day's details, the garden's orderly rows defying wilderness chaos, the goat's placid chewing, the smoke rising straight as a prayer unanswered. Yet beneath it all lurked something profane, a deliberate omission from God's ledger in man's. In biblical terms, this was no mere oversight, it was an act of erasure akin to blotting a name from the book of life, reserved for the gravest transgressions. Holt, a man of precision and light, felt the darkness seeping into his soul, stirring doubts he had long buried under layers of scientific certainty. Dawn broke gray and reluctant over Burnsville, the county seat of Yancey, where life moved in measured rhythms, wagons rumbling over rutted streets, the clang of blacksmith hammers like distant judgments. The survey office felt trivial now, its stacks of charts and ledgers pale imitations of truth compared to the living anomaly they had encountered. Holt's obsession had taken root, deep as mountain pine, twisting his purpose from mapping land to excavating souls. Evenings found him alone in the county clerk's office, a dim chamber lit by kerosene lamps that flickered like failing consciences. The air hung heavy with the musty breath of decaying paper, aged ink bleeding into yellowed pages, tax rolls listing names like fleeting epitaphs. Holt pored over plat maps, their faded lines mocking his earlier confidence, census enumerations from decades past, rows of families etched in spidery script, each entry a brief testament against oblivion. Martha Finch presided here, a sentinel of memory. Spectacles perched low on her nose, her gray hair pinned severe as Puritan judgment, she embodied the county's living archive. Her voice, dry as autumn leaves, carried the weight of witnessed lives. Vance, she echoed, finger tapping a ledger's edge. No record of that name in these hollows. The deep ridges hold Griers, Youngs, Silases, hard folk, God-fearing in their way, though secrets run deeper than roots. Vance sounds foreign to these parts. Holt pressed, describing the cabin's isolation, the defiant smoke curling against storm clouds. Martha's brow furrowed, lines deepening like fault lines in stone. Deep country, that, she murmured, voice dropping as if the walls might listen. Few settle so far. Too harsh for crops, too lonely for kin. But years back, before the war, mind, there was talk of a woman. Clara, they called her. Pretty, they said, with two little ones clinging to her skirts. Lived with a man not her husband. Quiet sort, kept apart. Folks whispered he was peculiar. Not cruel, just apart from grace. Then one day, gone. No farewell, no trail. Mountains take people sometimes, swallow them whole. Figured she fled, or he drove her off. Life's hard, folks vanish like mist. Clara, Holt repeated, the name tasting of ash. No surname, no destination, just disappearance, clean as a blade through thread. Martha's words aligned with the smoke from Vance's chimney, rising, vanishing, leaving only questions. A chill settled in Holt's bones, colder than mountain springs. Vance had claimed solitude eternal, yet here lay echoes of others, mother, children erased as thoroughly as the cabin itself. Biblical parallels flooded him, Cain's mark, hiding his crime, Jezebel's fall, body devoured so none remained, the unconfessed sin that festers, demanding divine retribution. Was this cabin a tomb disguised as home? A place where guilt had taken root, growing into isolation like thorns choking Eden? He sought Eli Greer at the livery, amid scents of oiled leather, hay, and horse sweat, earthly anchors in a world tilting toward mystery. Eli mended bridle with deliberate stitches, each pull a thread binding silence. Eli, Holt began, voice low, you know these ridges' secrets. Ever hear of Clara? Children? Living near or in that cabin before Vance? Eli's hands stilled. His dark eyes flickered, brief storm across calm waters, then fixed on distant peaks. Mountains talk, he said softly, but not to outsiders. Whispers of a woman, yes. Children. Came seeking refuge, found something else. Best leave old ghosts buried, Mr. Holt. Some sins the land claims for itself. Dig too deep, and the ground shifts under you. Ghosts? Holt pressed, frustration rising like bile. Or crimes? You're mountain-born. You carry their weight. Eli met his gaze, weariness ancient as granite. Code here, sir. Protect what's ours, even the dark. Outsiders map, measure, leave. We live with the consequences. Some doors stay shut for a reason. Divine or otherwise. The words landed like stones in still water. Eli's reticence confirmed it, not error, but intent. The cabin's absence from maps was protective, shielding a legacy of sin, perhaps murder cloaked in wilderness mercy. Holt sensed layers, guilt like original sin, passed down or guarded alone, redemption withheld, justice deferred to nature's slow court. The next expedition into Pisgah's depths carried altered gravity. Instruments remained, the theodolites. Brass gleaming like accusatory eyes, plain table steady under precise hands, but Holt's compass pointed inward now. Mapping became pretext, truth the quarry. Percy walked quieter, chatter silenced by dread. His eyes darted to shadows lengthening like fingers, sensing the spiritual weight pressing down, mountains as witnesses, indifferent yet omnipresent, echoing psalmist's cry, if I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. They reached the clearing at dusk, Vance tending garden with ritual slowness, back bent like burdened Atlas. His welcome held the same unnerving calm, pale eyes probing souls as if weighing sins on invisible scales. Supper passed in near silence, venison tough with age, berries tart as regret, fire crackling accusations. Holt, patience exhausted, confronted. Mr. Vance, records show nothing, no you, no cabin. But whispers persist. Of Clara. Her children. They lived here, then vanished. Not left. Vanished. Vance paused, pipe suspended, smoke curling like incense from a tainted altar. A shadow crossed his face, regret? Calculation? Something colder. Whispers, he echoed flatly. Mountains breed them like mist. Clara passed through. With young ones. Needed shelter. Mountains are unforgiving to the weak. I provided. Roof, food. But she wearied, longed for voices, lights, schools for the babes. Left one dawn. Years ago. Before your time. The tale flowed smooth, rehearsed, yet eyes betrayed depths, possessive flicker, guarded sorrow. Holt challenged. No one recalls her departure. No sighting elsewhere. People don't dissolve, Mr. Vance. Not without cause. Sin leaves marks on land, on men. Vance's gaze hardened, predator cornered.
Clara, he intoned, name heavy as millstone. She came broken. I offered mercy. Mountains decide who stays. She chose out. Found her path or lost it. God's wilderness, not mine to judge.
He turned to flames, profile etched in firelight, conversation sealed like tomb. While Vance fed the goat outside, movements methodical, back turned, Holt's pulse thundered. Heart a war drum, he moved to satchel. Inside, Locket and Doll, found earlier in hidden nook, tarnished silver heart engraved with tiny initials, porcelain face cracked yet innocent.
Proof of children, of life interrupted. Fingers trembling, Holt approached a loose floorboard near hearth, pried gently. Dust motes danced in fireglow. Beneath, small bundle, cloth wrapped. Heart seizing, he unfolded.
The cabin's interior felt smaller that afternoon, the air stale and thick, as though the logs themselves had absorbed decades of unvoiced remorse and were now exhaling it in slow, deliberate breaths. Thomas Holt moved with the quiet precision of a man who had crossed an invisible threshold, from observer to intruder, from mapper of land to excavator of souls. Percy stood frozen near the door, a pale sentinel of caution, his knuckles white around the strap of his satchel, eyes wide with the kind of fear that turns blood cold. He said nothing, could not, but his silence screamed disapproval, a mute plea to stop before the darkness swallowed them both. Holt ignored him. His hands, steady despite the tremor in his chest, traced the rough-hewn walls, fingers probing seams where chinking had crumbled like forgotten oaths. Under the narrow bed, nothing but dust and mouse droppings. Along the shelves, brittle religious tracts, yellowed copies of Pilgrim's Progress, a worn King James Bible with passages underlined in faded ink, sermons on judgment and the wages of sin. Almanacs charting moon phases and planting seasons, as if the old man had tried to impose order on chaos through predictable cycles of nature and scripture.
No confessions. No diaries.
Only the cold comfort of doctrine that offered no absolution. Then, behind a hearthstone slightly proud of its neighbors, mortar fresher, less blackened by soot, his fingertips met resistance. A small, hard object. He worked it free with care, as one might lift a relic from sacred ground. A wooden doll, no longer than his palm. Crudely carved, yet tender in its imperfection, rounded limbs smoothed by tiny fingers, painted eyes worn to ghostly blanks by years of loving abrasion. The faint scent of pine resin clung to it still, mingled with something sweeter, perhaps the ghost of a child's breath, or milk, or tears dried long ago. Holt turned it over. No name carved. No initials. Only the weight of interrupted innocence, heavy as lead in his hand. A toy abandoned not by a departing child, but by one who could never leave. Beneath a loose floorboard near the bed, pried up with trembling care, another secret waited. A silver locket, tarnished to near black, chain snapped as though torn in struggle or haste. Holt's breath caught as he forced the clasp. Inside, two tiny daguerreotypes, images fragile as whispered prayers. The first, a young woman, Clara, he knew without doubt. Her eyes kind yet weary, shadowed by hardship, mouth curved in the faintest, saddest smile, as though she had learned to carry sorrow without letting it break her. Hair pinned simply, dress patched but clean, dignity intact amid poverty. The second, two children, boy and girl, perhaps 4 and 6. Faces solemn, unnaturally still for the long exposure. The boy's hand rested on his sister's shoulder, protective, even then. Their eyes held the quiet question of the very young, will the world be gentle? Their clothes, though worn, bore the mark of careful mending. Clean faces. Combed hair. A mother's last, defiant act of love before the end. Holt's knees weakened. Why leave these behind? Why hide them like contraband? No mother abandons the only portraits of her babies unless forced, unless the choice was never hers. And Vance had kept them concealed, not discarded. Trophies? Reminders? Evidence buried against the day judgment came? The discoveries struck like hammer blows on stone. This was no transience passing. This was erasure, deliberate, complete. The cabin, unmapped, the family, unspoken, the keepsakes, entombed. Biblical echoes rang clear, the blood of Abel crying from the ground, Rachel weeping for her children, refusing comfort because they were no more. Here lay the same anguish, preserved in silence and soil.
From that moment, surveying became facade.
Holt no longer measured ridges for progress, he measured the depth of human darkness. The mountains, once majestic witnesses to creation, now stood as silent accomplices, vast cathedrals where sins were confessed to stone instead of God.
Evenings by the campfire brought no peace.
Percy, once eager, now huddled close to the flames as though light could ward off what lurked beyond. His voice cracked when he spoke.
"This isn't our place, Holt. We're not judges. We're not priests.
That man, that cabin, it reeks of wrongness. Like the air itself knows what happened and hates us for asking.
Let's finish the lines, pack the instruments, and leave before the mountains decide we're next."
Holt stared into the fire, the locket warm against his chest beneath his shirt.
"And what of justice, Percy? What of souls denied even the dignity of a name on a stone? We cannot chart the earth and ignore the blood beneath it. Truth is not optional." Eli, whittling a stick into nothing, finally spoke.
His voice rose like smoke from deep earth, low, ancient, weighted. "Your walking ground cursed long before you came, Mr. Holt.
Some truths poison the one who unearths them. The mountains protect their own, not always with mercy.
And the men who run them, they protect harder."
Holt turned. "You know more than whispers, Eli. You've carried this longer than any of us." Eli set the knife aside.
Firelight caught the lines in his face, grooves carved by generations of silence. "My kin have walked these ridges since before the war, before the surveyors, before maps pretended to own the land. We learn early, some doors stay shut."
Vance, he wasn't always alone. Clara came seeking shelter. Found it. Then didn't leave. Not alive.
Others before her.
After. The hollows are patient. They take what they want.
And sometimes men speed the process, men with timber deeds, moonshine stills, county power. Men who fear a name tied to a grave more than damnation.
The revelation landed like frost on bare skin. Not one crime, but a pattern.
A conspiracy of omission, cabin unmapped, lives unrecorded, graves unmarked, shielded by influence that reached beyond one old man. Power protected itself, and the mountains obliged with silence.
Next morning, compulsion drove Holt.
While sketching the clearing's contours, his eye caught a faint line through rhododendrons, narrow, deliberate, half-claimed by thorn and moss. A scar on the earth, hidden yet present. He pushed through. Branches clawed like repentant hands. Air cooled, dampened, scented with perpetual rot and mineral chill.
Light dimmed to cathedral bloom beneath overhanging hemlock.
In a sunken hollow, sun-starved, moss-draped, a small weathered cross leaned, wood soft with decay, inscription long erased by rain and time. Beside it, two smaller stones, rough, unmarked.
Graves without names. Graves without mourners. Graves that screamed in silence.
The soil around them looked freshly turned in places, dark, loose, as though visited recently. Not by grief, but perhaps by guilt. Or fear of discovery.
Nausea rose in Holt's throat. This was finality. No departure. No new life elsewhere. Only endings, concealed beneath indifferent green. A twig snapped. He whirled. Eli stood at the thicket's edge, face carved from grief and resignation. "I warned you," Eli said, voice flat, empty. "Now you see. The mountains don't forgive curiosity. Neither do the men who feed them secrets." "Who?" Holt demanded, voice shaking with fury and horror. "Clara. The children. How many more?" Eli's eyes glistened, one tear tracing the furrow of his cheek. "Clara. The babes. Others, before and since. The land takes its toll.
Men hasten it, for land, for liquor, for silence.
Vance, strange, yes. But never alone.
Friends in high hollows, men who own the deeds, the stills, the boats. Men who would rather bury truth than face it." Before Holt could press further, another figure stepped from shadow.
Silas Boone Broad.
Bearded, timber baron of local legend. Shotgun rested easy on his shoulder, barrel catching the scant light like a promise of judgment.
Eyes cold as winter granite.
Surveyor, Boone rumbled, voice vibrating through the hollow. You draw lines where none belong.
Some places stay blank for reason.
Mark too deep, and you disappear same as them. He nodded toward the stones.
Mountains keep what they claim. You best remember that, or join 'em.
The threat hung palpable, metallic.
Not bluster. Certainty.
Authority backed by land, money, and the willingness to erase.
Holt stood amid the graves, heart hammering. The conspiracy crystallized, not one killer, but a system. Power shielding power. Silence bought with fear. The unmapped cabin a monument to complicity.
Yet resolve hardened in him, steel forged in fire.
Truth, however late, demanded voice.
The map would bear witness not just to ridges, but to blood. Percy, when Holt returned, was already packing, hands shaking, face ashen.
I'm gone, Holt. This is suicide.
They'll bury us with the rest.
No one will look.
Holt barely heard.
Eyes fixed on the cabin's silhouette.
Eli lingered, knife sheathed, expression mournful yet resolute. I can't let you face it alone, Mr. Holt.
Not anymore.
The clearing held its breath as Thomas Holt and Eli Greer approached the cabin once more. The air felt heavier than before, saturated with the scent of damp earth and impending rain, a baptismal promise that never quite arrived. Vance sat on the porch steps, whittling a length of cedar with slow, mechanical strokes. Each curl of wood fell like a discarded sin, landing soundless on the packed dirt. His pale eyes lifted only when their boots crunched gravel.
No startle. No fear.
Only the weary recognition of a man who had long anticipated this hour of reckoning, as though fate itself had penciled it on his calendar decades ago. You found the hollow, Vance said, voice flat as river stone, knife never pausing.
Clara. The little ones. Their place. I always knew someone would come digging sooner or later. Holt stepped forward, the locket and doll extended in his open palm like offerings or evidence.
The silver caught the weak sunlight, throwing fractured glints across Vance's lined face.
The doll's blank eyes stared upward, accusing in their innocence. Why unmarked graves? Holt's voice cracked on the edge of rage and grief. Why no name on any map?
Why did the whole county conspire to bury them twice, once in earth, once in silence?
What did you do here, Vance? What sin demanded such erasure? Vance set the knife aside.
The cedar piece rolled from his fingers, a half-formed figure, perhaps a child, perhaps nothing. He exhaled, long and rattling, as though releasing decades of pent breath. I came here young, he began, gaze fixed on some invisible horizon beyond the ridges.
Fleeing a life that had already broken me. Built this place board by board. Lived alone. Liked it that way.
Then she appeared, Clara. Running from a husband who beat the spirit half out of her. 2 children trailing like frightened shadows.
Hungry. Cold. Scared. I gave them roof. Food. Safety.
Or so I told myself. His tone remained even, clinical, as though recounting someone else's life.
At first it was charity. Then, something else. They were mine. My family. The only thing that made this silence bearable. She started talking about leaving. Town. School for the young ones. People. Life beyond these walls. I couldn't allow it. This was home. I had built it. Protected it. They belonged here. With me. Forever.
The words landed like slow hammer blows.
No tremor of remorse. No plea for understanding.
Only possession, distilled to its coldest essence. She tried to go once, Vance continued.
Packed what little they had. Night. Moonless. I woke. Found them at the edge of the clearing.
Words were said. Hands were raised.
Things happened. Fast. Final. The children saw. Cried out. I couldn't let them carry that memory into the world. Couldn't let anyone know. So I ended it. Clean. Quick.
Buried them proper, in the hollow where the sun never pries. Marked only with stones so I'd remember.
No names. Names bring questions. Questions bring outsiders.
He paused, eyes drifting to the locket in Holt's hand.
Kept those. Couldn't burn them. Couldn't throw them away. They were proof. Of what I had. Of what I lost. Of what I kept. Eli stood rigid beside Holt, fists clenched at his sides. When he spoke, his voice trembled, not with fear, but with the release of something long damned. My grandfather heard the screams that night, Eli said. Carried them like stones in his chest till he died. Never spoke. Couldn't. Men like Silas Boone made sure of it. Timber money. Moonshine routes. Fugitives hidden here when the law came close. This cabin was their blind spot. Their safe house. A place to meet, deal, disappear bodies if needed. Clara and her children? Inconvenient. So the records stayed clean. Sheriff Jedediah Shaw looked away. Took favors. Kept his badge. Whole county breathed easier with one less name to account for. Vance nodded once, almost imperceptibly. They needed the quiet. I needed the quiet. Arrangements suited everyone. The confession hung between them raw, unadorned, monstrous in its banality. No demonic possession. No ancient curse. Just human frailty twisted into ownership, shielded by power, preserved by fear. Holt felt the ground tilt beneath him. Not supernatural horror, but something worse, the ordinary machinery of evil. A possessive heart. A community's calculated blindness. A landscape vast enough to hide both. They left Vance on the porch, knife once more in hand, carving as though nothing had changed. But everything had. In Burnsville, Holt laid the evidence before Sheriff Shaw in the dim backroom of the courthouse. Locket. Doll. Eli's sworn statement. Coordinates of the hollow. Shaw's face drained of color, his hands shook as he touched the silver heart, as though it burned. The arrest came quietly. No fanfare. No mob. Vance went without resistance, wrists bound, eyes vacant. Trial held in closed session, scandal contained, reputations guarded. Guilty. Life. Disappeared into the state prison system like smoke into wind. His name finally written on a prison ledger, a court docket. A belated inscription. The cabin stood empty. Seasons turned. Vines claimed the porch. Roof sagged. Garden choked with weeds. Eventually the forest reclaimed it entirely, logs rotting back to soil, chimney crumbling, only the ghost of a footprint remaining. Locals avoided the spot. Children were told it was haunted. Truth was worse. Boone and the others? Untouched. Influence too deep. Connections too wide. Favors too many. Shaw retired soon after, pension secure, conscience perhaps quieter in the silence of old age. Holt finished the survey. Every contour, every stream, every peak rendered with surgical accuracy. When he reached the cabin's coordinates, his pencil hesitated. He drew a faint circle unlabeled, barely visible unless one knew to look. A private scar on the map. A refusal to let erasure win completely. He submitted the charts to the USGS. Dry. Precise. Scientific. No mention of graves, confessions, complicity. The passion that once drove him had cooled. Mountains were no longer grand riddles. They were witnesses, silent, complicit, eternal. Eli remained in the ridges. Older. Quieter. The weight of truth had lifted one burden only to settle another.
He guided when asked, moved slower, listened harder to the wind. Sometimes he paused at the old hollow, laid wildflowers on the stones.
No words. Just presence. A belated vigil.
Years passed. The story became mountain lore whispered by firelight, half remembered, half invented. Some said spirits lingered.
Others knew better.
The real haunting was simpler, more terrible: human hands, human silence, human power.
Holt carried the locket and doll until his own end.
Kept them wrapped in oilcloth, hidden in a drawer. On quiet nights he opened them, traced Clara's weary smile, the children's solemn gazes.
Reminders that some sins are mapped only in memory. The Appalachians endure. Peaks rise indifferent. Hollows hold their breath. And somewhere, in unmarked soil, 3 small graves wait, proof that erasure is never perfect.
That truth, however buried, however bought, however feared, finds its way upward.
Like roots cracking stone. Like light piercing fog.
Sometimes the wind carries a faint cry, not ghost, but echo. A child's laugh cut short.
A mother's plea unanswered. A warning. How many other cabins remain missing? How many other silences still hold? The mountains remember. And one day, they may speak again.